So now that we've established that we want to do a composable architecture with smaller pieces, of course, there are some ways how you can actually connect these pieces to make it one cohesive architecture. So, Markus, what are your views on how that works, the ways to do it or not to do it?
So basically, if you're jumping into that whole composable topic, you need really a plan how to execute that. Because what we often see is that teams are starting to decouple or get into microservice or composable architectures, but you really have an impact on that and you're gaining challenges out of that if you don't plan it properly in that case. And that means on the one side, if you're just connecting all the systems to each other and you get kind of new spaghetti microservice architecture in that case, you're getting problems on the customer experience, because basically if the data is decoupled and diversified in several data stores, it's pretty hard to orchestrate that unique user experience in the front end and grab the right data set for the right application at the right time, which leads to confusion and loses the trust of the application from the point of view of your ad customer in that case. Most of that is driven by divergent data structures, so that you're not having the data at full swing, because if you're decoupling, then it's getting pretty hard to sync the data properly in that case, or also having the data schemas aligned so that it's also nice for the user experience in that case. So you have those two topics on that angle, meaning the diverse data structure, which is also affected by some kind of synchronization delays, which is ending up into a bad user experience.
Yeah, and so when we talk about this in a slightly more technical way, we know we have to make it a cohesive architecture, but not couple everything in such a way that it's almost worse than a monolith. Because you can code yourself into a web of troubles. And so there's a few ways we see in the wild how this works. Like the easiest way you can do this is in your implementation, let's say your front end, your website or your app, you just connect to all the services and clean the data from all these places into one bit. That's your front end. However, if you add another channel, you have to do that again. And if something changes, your code is full of stuff that is way too complicated and super smart for what a front end should need, right? So that's what we see most, but at scale, it's just not maintainable. You get lots of technical debt. It's like, how do I morph this API and that one and put them together? That's a piece of code that needs to be unit tested, which will likely not be unit tested. And all that stuff is complex, right? And so we kind of need to find a way to couple that decoupled data that actually makes a little bit more sense, where your front ends or your implementation sites, your phone apps or your websites or your refrigerator apps, all that remains super simple. The simpler that is, the better it works, because you have your data managed somewhere else. And that is what we like to call at HighGraph content federation. And in federation, you have a ton of different ways, but the way we like to do it is to actually have a layer in between that aggregates all the data from all your specialty services, like your wishlist, like your, all these like PIM systems, DAM systems, they all come into HighGraph. And HighGraph is a GraphQL API, and we won't go much deeper technically than that, but what that means is HighGraph can take over that API and make it a schema that your front end can always query the same way, either in the HighGraph CMS or just as a data source that you need from your front end. But that means your code doesn't have to know anything about these specialty services, but just about that aggregation layer. And the way HighGraph does it is that it leaves these sources that you have, like your PIM system, like your wishlist, whatever, autonomous. So when you scale, you can have specialty people that are really specialist at building like a search index or a wishlist, work on that, and then the data goes into HighGraph and it stays the same way. And it just caches it on the CDN, and you can change it all the time fast if you want to. You can even do a call from a system to say to HighGraph, this is now new data, or it has a 30-second timeout, stuff like that. But that means is you have autonomous sources, and then you have web developers that only have to query one thing. It's all the same. It's super simple. And that's something that we're quite proud of, to have that as a CMS, because it's a pretty challenging thing to nail down. And there are so many ways to roam to get there, right? And especially when you throw in the scale part of things.